Now, in addition to creating our own render passes, there are actually programs out there that can give us pre-built render passes. From our last tutorial, we could see where in order to generate this image, we had to create a vector render pass to get these dashed lines. We used, that's these dashed lines here. We use a hidden line pass from SketchUp to get these other lines. Actually, we use a vector pass hidden line as well, and then we use a shaded pass from SketchUp. In addition to this, we use some effects in Photoshop to get some special effects here and there. Now, these passes had to be created manually. We had to ensure that the camera view did not move, and then we had to layer them again and make sure that they are properly aligned. Now, when dealing with passes, you usually will have to ensure that they are properly aligned. However, let's look at Lumion, for example. Now, when we open a scene like this one here, and we can see that we've added the building in this scene, Lumion allows us to render out multiple render passes automatically. So for example, if I should look in the image settings and click on render, I see where Lumion gives me the ability to render additional special passes along with the actual rendered image. Now these passes have different names. So for example, we can see where we have a depth pass. So then we have a normal map pass, we have a specular reflection, and a lighting pass, and a sky alpha, and a material ID. So when we hit render, what we will get is the primary rendered image, and this would be representing the shaded layer. In SketchUp, for example, we could get a shaded layer, but of course SketchUp doesn't have the ability to render photorealistic images. In this case, Lumion has the ability to do that. In addition to that, I also have a depth pass. This is what a depth pass looks like. I have a lighting pass, and a lighting pass shows only lighting, no color, no texture. The depth pass shows different shades of gray at different depth areas in the screen. So for example, this is completely white because it is closest to the screen, and this person here in the background is almost fully black because it's the furthest in the scene, and then everything else is kind of calculated in between. You know, we can kind of see where we're going from brightest to most dull. Now, if we look at the other passes that we have here, we also have a material ID pass. And what the material ID pass does is that it gives us a color for every material. So it makes it very easy to select something that has a particular color. So if I tell Photoshop to select this color here, it will select also this, even some of the rocks has that color as well. Anything in the scene that has this color will be automatically selected. and that makes it easy to do a whole host of different effects. Now the next pass that we're going to see here is a normal pass, and the normal is a very special pass. You can think as a normal pass as a special camera trick that enables the computer to identify depth, bumps and ridges in various materials. Now the best example I can give you of that is, let's say you look at this image here. Now we know that a 3D image is made up of polygons, and we can see where these individual polygons kind of make up this image. Kind of looks like a big blob because it doesn't have enough polygons so that you can start to get the detail of the eyes and the beard and all of that. You really need to have more polygons. Now more polygons mean more resources, more memory, but nevertheless more detail. So for example, if we look at this image here, we can see where this has almost like quadruple the amount of polygons, but then you can start to see that you start to pick up the details such as the hair, because there is enough polygons to now represent that detail. Now what a normal map does, it allows us to use minimum amount of polygons, combine that with a special map. Notice how this map looks just like the one we just saw, and get the same amount of detail using this amount of polygon. It's actually pretty amazing. So this image here and this image has the same amount of triangles, yet still this image looks as detailed as this image, which has millions of triangles. Like if you look on this image here, you can't even see the sizes of the triangles because they're just like millions and millions of triangle, yet still these two look almost identical. And it's all because of the normal map. It's because the computer reads this special texture, and based on the color values in here, it can determine that certain areas should appear to look raised and some should appear to look depressed. And those two combination of allowing some areas in this model to look raised and some not raised is comes together to give it beautiful details. Now this is primarily used a lot in video games where computer systems would be overwhelmed with trying to animate millions of polygons. Instead, it just animates a few polygons, but then it uses the normal map to let it look as good as if it had millions of polygons. So too in the world of ArcViz, we can use a normal map to get particular lighting effects from our image. This next pass is pretty obvious. This is a alpha pass, and essentially all it does, it gives us a black and white mask to make it very easy to cut out the background. Then this pass is a specular pass where it only shows items that are reflective. Now you might be saying, well, why do we need all these passes? Because this image looks just fine. Like, what would we possibly do additionally to this image using a pass? Now, one of the most popular things that we may do, and what I'll do is I'll open up Photoshop. Now, when I open this image in Photoshop, what I'm going to do is I'm going to also drag in, let's use the material ID pass. Now once it's in, if I take a look at my layers, you will see that I have the background layer, which is the rendered image, and this is sometimes called the beauty pass. And then I have the material ID pass on top. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to rasterize the material ID because I might need to manipulate those pixels, and I'm going to make a layer from the background. All right. Now, one of the more popular uses with using render passes, especially the material ID pass, is that it allows us to select a particular material and makes it easy for us to use that selection on another layer. Now, a good demonstration of this is, let's say that I wanted to maybe apply this image here and use that as a kind of graffiti on this wall that we see here. Perhaps an even better image would be this one. And let's say that I wanted to apply this on this wall here and kind of have that looking like a graffiti that's right there. Now, first thing I would need to do is to drag this into Photoshop. And when I pull it in, it will go on its own layer. So we're going to zoom out and make that a little smaller. And the idea is that we would want to kind of place it in this area here. Now, we already recognize that we have black that's represented here, and we can use one of the render passes that will automatically remove anything that is black from an image and shows the layer below. The next thing is we perhaps would want to align the perspective of this when we put it on the wall. So let's do that first. So this is a smart layer, as we can see here, and the advantage with that is that it will allow us to edit in a non-destructive way. So for example, we could apply a transform distort, and what this allows us to do is to distort this image. There we go. So already it's kind of looking like it is on that wall. And we're going to choose OK. Now the next thing that we want to do is we could apply a blending mode. So for example, the screen or the lighting, we could use the lighting mode, and we already see where that looks pretty much like it is there on the wall. Now there are still some areas that obviously would need to be cut out. So for example, where the doors are, and we could use the same approach where we could add a mask to this layer, and on this mask the rules are, if we paint with black while the mask layer is selected here, then anything that we paint should be erased. So for example, we could paint over the area here where the door is, and we could kind of erase this area here, and you know, then it starts to look a little more like that. However, there is an easier way using this same formula. So I'm going to undo that. And that way is to use the material ID pass. Now, I'm going to turn off these other layers and just work with this pass for a little bit. Now, what you might notice is that if I use the magic wand, right click and go to color range, what this does is this gives me a little pipette icon, and what I can do is click on any color in the scene and it will select all similar colors for me. Very useful tool. So for example, I can click this wall here and say okay to that, and then what you might notice is that I now get anything with this material, including this stone here, including this tree in the background here. Anything that has this color is automatically selected. So let's turn that layer off. So this is great because we can already see where we could use this as a mask to cut out that graffiti that we had there. So if you remember how masks work, we would need to have a black and white image. So we could use the fill tool, and the idea is we would want to fill the areas that we want to delete with black and fill the areas that we want to keep with white. So I'm going to create a new layer and I'll call this layer mask. And what I'll do is I want to keep all this area here. So I'm going to choose white to fill that. And basically I want to erase everything else. So I can just go on the selection tool and select invert, and then I can fill all of that with black, all of these areas with black. All right, so let me deselect. So I'm going to right click on deselect. Additionally, oh wait, I'm not done yet. All right, so I want to keep all of these and I want to delete all of these. All of these areas I would want to delete. All right. Now, additionally, I'm going to deselect and I'm going to use my brush, and I'll set my brush to black, and I will just get rid of all of these things here because I don't want to keep any of these things. There we go. And let's make that smaller. I really don't need to keep anything in here because this is really what I want to use right here. All right, so that's great. I have this nice mask now. So all I need to do is to apply this black and white mask to this mask layer here for the graffiti. Now, what I can do is first I'll go to my mask layer and I need to select this layer, all the pixels in this layer. So I'm going to go to my selection tool, select all the pixels, and I'll choose copy. All right, great. So deselect. So I can do away with this layer. Now I'm going to turn on the graffiti layer, and then I'm going to alt click on the mask layer, and that will open up just the mask layer. And I'm going to paste all of those pixels on the mask layer. I'm going to alt click again to close the mask layer. And then what you realize that's happened is that anywhere that was black is automatically cut out. So if I turn on back my background here, and remember that I applied a overlay to this layer, right? So I'm using the lighter color overlay. Could use this overlay here. That one looks pretty nice as well. And I could use multiply as well, but multiply still gives me the black, so I think I'm going to work with the screen. All right. Now this is cut out, but the great thing about this is if I just disable this link icon here, then I can freely move this around with no worry and about having to cut these areas out. I could even make it bigger. And it will remain cut out just the same. Click OK to make it bigger. Now you could use this very same theory to change even materials. If you wanted to change the material of this section, you could use the render pass to select just this material. Of course, there are some changes that is easier done in the render program compared to in post-production, which is what we're doing now. Typically, we would add things like maybe some people, maybe some kind of exterior signage and things like that. Those things are excellent to be done outside the program, so you don't have to go in a 3D environment to get a particular signage, right? So this process makes it very easy. Now, using non-destructive editing techniques, you can make additional changes to just the graffiti. So for example, if I add a hue saturation and then I click this icon here, which is primarily, that's this icon here, which allows it to only affect the layer below. So when I click this icon, notice you get this little arrow here, and it says that, okay, whatever I do here will only affect this and not everything below. So now I can click the hue saturation slider, and for example, I could increase, or I could change the hue of just that graffiti that's right there. Could make it more pale. There we go. And basically I could apply any effect I want to just this layer. Another easy common thing I could do using the Material ID render pass would be to select the windows. So if I go back to color range and I select all of these windows, so let's turn that back off, then I could create a new layer, and on that new layer I could maybe fill it with a color, maybe a yellow color, and that would fill in all my windows, right? So I'm going to deselect. Now I could do the same thing where I use the different transform modes to essentially let it look like the lights are on in the building. And maybe that one. And additionally, I could turn this layer into a smart object, and I could add some other effects to it. So for example, I could go to let's go again. I could go to distort and add a diffuse glow to that layer. And essentially what that would do is that would add a glow to just this layer here. So for example, there we go, that's a bit much. Oh, when you use this tool, you have to ensure that this is black and white. So I'm going to go back. Add a diffuse glow. There we go. Then I could turn down the opacity a little bit so that's not so bright. Now another effect that we could also add, we usually add people in architectural scenes. And if I should open, let's go here. This image here, I see where I have 3 layers. I have a mask layer, and I have the person already that's cut out. Now I have 2 Photoshop files open, and if I want to take this image into here, well, all I need to do is to right click and duplicate, and I will duplicate that to the render passes layer. So now see that layer is here. And let's make that a little smaller. Now another effect that we can also add to this, and we can go to filter, and there are quite a bit of effects here that we could add. In this case, we could add a blur, and we could add a motion blur, and that's a little bit much. Let's change the direction, and definitely let's increase the amount of blur. So you can start to kind of have a case where images look like they are moving. And of course we can adjust the transparency of those layers as well.